गिरिवरधारी जय जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे राम हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे। हरिनाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की जगत गुरु श्रील प्रभुपाद की ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki. We are reading from Canto 5, Chapter 17, verse number 20. Asadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya Shibeva madva asavatamra lochanaha Nanagavadvo rehana ishire hriya Yat padayo sparshana dharshitendriyaha Asadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya Shibeva madva asavatamra lochanaha Nanagavadvo rehana ishire hriya Yat padayo sparshana dharshitendriyaha Asadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya Shibeva madva asavatamra lochanaha Nanagavadvo rehana ishire hriya Yat padayo sparshana dharshitendriyaha
Asadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya
Sadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya
Shibeva madva savatamra lochanaha
Shibeva madva savatamra lochanaha
Nanagavadvo rana ishire hriya
Nanagavadvo rehana ishire hriya
Yat padayo sparshana darshitendriyaha
Sadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya Shibeva madva asavatamra lochanaha Nanagavadvo rehana ishire hriya Yat padayo sparshana dharshitendriyaha
Asadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya
Asadrisho ya pratibhati mayaya
Shibeva madva savatamra lochanaha
Shibeva madva asavatamra lochanaha Nanagavadvo rehana ishire hriya Yat padayo sparshana dharshitendriya. Word-to-word meanings. Asadrisha, for a person with polluted vision. Pratibhati, yah, who. Pratibhati, appears. Mayaya, the influence of Maya. Shibha, one who is inebriated or angry. Iva, like. Madhu, by honey. Asava, and liquor. Tamra lochanaha, having eyes reddish like copper. Na, not. Nagavadvaha, the wives of the serpent demon. Arhane, in worshipping. Ishire, were unable to proceed. Hriya, because of bashfulness. Yat padayo, of whose lotus feet. Sparshana, by the touching. Dharshita, agitated. Indriya, whose senses. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation. For persons with impure vision, the Supreme Lord's eyes appear like those of someone who indiscriminately drinks intoxicating beverages. Thus bewildered, such unintelligent persons become angry at the Supreme Lord, and due to their angry mood, the Lord Himself appears angry and very fearful. However, this is an illusion. When the wives of the serpent demon were agitated by the touch of the Lord's lotus feet, due to shyness they could proceed no further in their worship of Him. Yet the Lord remained unagitated by the touch, for He is equipoised in all circumstances. Therefore, who will not worship the Supreme Lord, Supreme Personality of Godhead? Purport. Anyone who remains unagitated even in the presence of cause for agitation is called dhira or equipoised. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being always in a transcendental position, is never agitated by anything. Therefore, someone who wants to become dhira must take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita 2.13, Krishna says, Dhiras tatra na mohyati. A person who is equipoised in all circumstances is never bewildered. Prahlad Maharaj is a perfect example of a dhira. When the fierce form of Narasimha Dev appeared in order to kill Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad was unagitated. He remained calm and quiet, whereas others, including even Lord Brahma, were frightened by the features of the Lord. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padkamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Shah Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashat Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Tushe Nama He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpataro Bhesha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatam ham vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So we are discussing this verse from the 5th canto. And here we see the prayers of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva's prayers of glorification of Sankarshan is going on. And in this series of prayers, he speaks this verse. So now here very interesting thing that is given is, when some ordinary person, they hear of the Lord's eyes or Lord's form. So sometimes it's mentioned they get bewildered. Especially the people that are mentioned in this verse is asadrisha. That people who have a polluted vision. Or people whose vision is impure. So such persons, when they hear about the form of the Lord, when they hear the descriptions of the Lord, they sometimes get bewildered because they are influenced by the illusory energy of the Lord. Here it's mentioned in this verse that sometimes they might feel, or that by the descriptions it might be given that his eyes appears to be rolling, and they might feel that his eyes are rolling in intoxication. and they are also red in color, and they might feel, oh, he's also like us, he's also drunk like us. His eyes also become red, just like when we get drunk, our eyes become red. Or when people in this world get drunk, or people there, when they don't sleep properly, their eyes become red. So they might also think that similarly the Lord's eyes are also like that, or they might also compare the Lord. But here very nicely it's explained that this is the vision of those people that is like that. It's not that the Lord's eyes becomes like that, or Lord is actually intoxicated, but it's the vision of these people. Because their vision is impure, they are the ones who are intoxicated. They are the ones who are foolish and who see the form of the Lord like that, or who see the eyes or description of the Lord like that. And that is what is given. That's why they become disrespectful towards the Lord. That's what is mentioned, that they become angry at the Supreme Lord. They become disrespectful towards the Supreme Lord. But here in the commentary, it's explained very nicely that Lord form or Lord's eyes, Lord's entire description is actually not like that. Lord's form is eternal and Lord's form is always full of bliss. But it's the eyes of these people, they are seeing all these faults in the Lord, or all these things in the Lord. So I was hearing this once, very nice example was given about Srila Prabhupada. So once he was doing a simple activity, he was drinking from his cup, he was drinking water. And it seems he drinks in a very special, unique way. He holds the cup and one of his fingers is out. That's what his disciple was describing. So he drinks in a very, very unique, very, very royal way. So then the disciple, when he was watching this activity, he started glorifying Prabhupada. That Prabhupada, you drink in a very, very amazing way. It's a very unique way and we are very attracted. So Prabhupada that time he made a very, very nice statement. He said that this is because you have affection for me. The point he was trying to make, if we have affection for someone, or if you have love for someone, all the activities the person does, those activities appear attractive, or those activities appear very nice. And that is why we see all the activities Prabhupada used to do, his disciples were mesmerized. Even simple activities, he'll do kirtan, he'll do the way he walked, the way he sat, the way he maintained his room. Every activity, all the disciples of Prabhupada were mesmerized and amazed that how amazing, how wonderful is Prabhupada. And the only reason was because they had love towards Prabhupada. They were completely surrendered to Srila Prabhupada. And on the other way, we see if some person is envious of some personality, or if there is envy within us towards someone, then the same actions, same activities the other person will be doing, but we will be finding faults in the same activity. Anything the person will be doing, any activity the person will be doing, even if the activity will be correct, but we'll still find fault in that activity. Even for that matter, sitting, walking, or any kind of activity, we'll be finding some or the other fault, and the reason is because there is envy within. The point is, the idea is that if someone halves that enviousness within anyone, then he cannot see any good quality in them. Or then anything the person does, they'll find some faults in that activity or the faults in that personality. Like I mentioned the example of Prabhupada. Prabhupada's disciples, they loved him, and all the activities which Prabhupada did, they were fascinated by that activity. They were attracted by that activity. But then there were outside people also. There were many people, his disciple was himself mentioning, when they came to India, there were so many people who were criticizing Prabhupada also. Even though he did such a great task, even though he actually preached throughout the world, which was the desire of his spiritual master. But still some of his god brothers also were finding faults in his activity. And the only reason is being because there was enviousness within them. There was a jealousy that we couldn't do, and he had done that order of the spiritual master, and that is the reason, even though he did a glorious activity, they were finding faults in that. And same way we understand here also, people when they talk about Krishna, or when their vision is impure, and when they are envious towards the Lord, then naturally they are able to find faults even in the Supreme Lord. People who are naturally envious of Krishna, they are the ones who find faults in any of the activities of the Lord. Just like here the example of the description of the eyes is given. When we hear the description of the eyes, we find it relishable, or we find it nice. But when envy is there within, the same description of the eyes appears like intoxication, or appears like something which is negative. And the reason being, there is natural enviousness that is there within. So here we see this description is given. This is given by Lord Shiva. He is glorifying his Ishtadev, he is glorifying Sankarshan, he is glorifying the form of the Lord, and he is telling that everyone should worship. In the last line he mentioned that who should not worship, everyone should worship the Supreme Personality. But then people who are envious, they are the ones who will always refrain from this activity. They are the ones who will become angry at the form of the Lord, angry at this description, and they are the ones who will never take to worship of the Supreme Lord. And another point that is mentioned is they are also very, very fearful of the Lord. So this is another result of envy. When a person is envious, we see the examples in the Shastra like Kamsa, who was always envious of Krishna, always thinking, because he knew that Krishna is supposed to kill me in the future. He used to always think of Krishna, and that enviousness was there within, and that's why naturally he would become fearful of the Lord. Or he was always fearful, anytime anything can happen, and how can Krishna kill me? And that's why he was always plotting against the Lord. So natural result of envy is fearfulness. The person becomes very, very fearful. On the other hand, we see the example as it's given in this verse itself of pure devotees like Prahlad Maharaj, who even at that form of the Lord, which was actually very fearful for everyone around, and even the demigods were bewildered to some extent. But even seeing that form of the Lord, he was fearful. He was fearless. He was not at all agitated even seeing that form of the Lord. Because he had natural love for the Lord. He didn't have even a single trace of envy within him. And as Prabhupada gives the example of that cat and mouse and cat and kitten, that the activity externally might be same. The mouse is also in the mouth. Sometimes the mouse may be in the mouth of the cat, and a kitten may also be in the mouth of the cat. But the kitten is always completely fearless, because it's know that the cat will take care of him, cat will not bite him or cat will not eat him. But the mouse is very, very fearful. And same way here it happens, people who have that envy towards the Lord, or people who have that hatred towards the Lord, naturally they are also very, very fearful of the Lord. They'll always be worried what will happen in their life, what next will happen, and they'll always be thinking Lord will do something in their life, or Lord will create problems in their life. Even though when we read descriptions of the Lord, we know that Lord is not such an entity. He is a very merciful personality, very great personality. And as we have been discussing in the previous verses, how Lord comes in different forms, like the form of river like Ganges, in the form of the Mahamantra, in the form of so many devotees, just to deliver the living entities. But still there are many people who will be very, very fearful of the Lord, and when they hear descriptions, they become very, very frightened. And the only reason that is mentioned is because they have a natural enviousness towards the Supreme Lord. And that is the reason they see the form of the Lord as very, very frightening, and they become fearful at the description of the Lord. And that is also the reason, that's why they end up finding so many faults in the Lord. Even though the beautiful form of the Lord which is described, which is relished by devotees, the same form they will find so many faults in the Lord. So that is what is mentioned here, that those who have this polluted vision, or those who have this asadrisha, they become fearful or they become angry at the form of the Lord. Or they are not able to appreciate that form of the Lord, even though that is a very, very great form, or that is a very, very appreciable form, or very, very appreciable description of the Lord. So further it's mentioned that however this is an illusion, or these people who are there, they are in an illusion. That form is very beautiful, but they are illusioned by the illusory potency of the Lord, and that's why they are thinking that form like that. And further the description that is mentioned is, when the wives of the serpent demon were agitated by the touch of the Lord's lotus feet, due to shyness they could proceed no further in their worship of him. Yet the Lord remains unagitated by the touch, for he is equipoised in all circumstances. So here another point that is mentioned is that the Lord is always unagitated. Or Lord is always equipoised in all circumstances. Prabhupada used the word of dhira in the purport. And that is but natural. If the devotees who are surrendered to the Lord, they become dhira or they become unagitated, naturally the Lord will always be unagitated in all circumstances. In one of the lectures, Prabhupada mentions like that Krishna is a perfect brahmachari. And he says that even though he was in the middle of night, he was among the gopis and so many young girls were there. And out of his humility, he says that I do not know if I would have been in that condition, what would have happened. But then he says, but Krishna is a perfect brahmachari. And that's what is described. Dhira means that even in the presence of provocation, there is some provocation, there is a cause for agitation, but the person does not get disturbed. And Prabhupada was glorifying the Lord that he does not get disturbed in any circumstance. Even though all the village girls and all the pastimes we see how they were attracted towards the Supreme Lord, they wanted to dance with the Supreme Lord, but he was not at all agitated in all the circumstances. He was a perfect dhira in all the circumstances. We never hear the Lord getting agitated in any circumstance. That is what is mentioned here, that how the Lord is dhira, or how the Lord is not agitated in any circumstance. And that is why that famous shloka from the Chaitanya Charitamrita that says, Ekale Ishwara Krishna ar sab bhritya, yare yaiche nachaye, se taiche kare nitya. That he is the supreme controller, he is the cause of all causes. How can he get agitated in anything? Even the great demigods who are there, the great personalities who are there in this world, they are the ones who dance according to the will of the Supreme Lord, or they do all the activities according to the will of the Supreme Lord. So how can the Supreme Lord get affected, or how can the Supreme Lord get agitated in any circumstances? And there are many such pastimes that are given, many such case studies are there where these great devotees, they were bewildered, but the Lord was not affected, Lord was not at all agitated. We know the pastime of Brahma, how Brahma got bewildered once. When this was the pastime after killing Aghasur, when Krishna and all the devotees who were there, all the cowherd boys, all the calves, they had gone to the forest for a picnic. They were there, they were enjoying nicely, and somehow the calves went away for taking grass. They were allured by the grass. And Brahma, he wanted to test the potency of the Lord. So Brahma, it's described, he stole all the calves. And then the boys were worried, the cowherd boys who were there, they were worried, where did the cows go? They were not able to see the calves. So they thought they will go behind, or they will find out where the calves are. But then Krishna said that no problem, you take your prasad, I'll go and find them out, or I'll go where the calves are. And then Krishna left that place, Krishna started going in the forest. And that time Brahma came, he stole all the cowherd boys also. He kidnapped all the cowherd boys and put them in a cave. But that time it's described that when Krishna came back, Krishna saw all that, he was not at all agitated, he was not affected. Rather, he is the supreme controller, he could understand what has happened. He could understand that how Brahma had done this activity, and immediately, just for the pleasure of his devotee or just to teach his devotee a lesson, he expanded himself into so many forms. Or he expanded himself into all the cowherd boys, into all the calves. And again they resumed their pastimes. So we know the further pastime that how Brahma came, he was bewildered and then he offered his prayers, all that we know. But one of the very astonishing factors, or one of the very astonishing things in this pastime, that even Balram to some extent was bewildered in this. It's described that when all this had happened, when Krishna had expanded into the cowherd boys and calves, so one thing that had happened is all the mothers who were there in Vrindavan, all the gopis who were there in Vrindavan, naturally before that everything was centered around Krishna, everyone was affectionate toward Krishna. But when this pastime happened, it's happened that all the mothers became attracted to their sons also to a very great extent. Just like they were attracted to Krishna, they were attracted to their own sons. The cows in Vrindavan, they were attracted to the cows to a very, very great extent. Even the calves which were not taking milk from them, the cows became attracted even to those cows. And seeing all this, Balram was also bewildered. Balram was also feeling so much attracted to all these calves, to all the cowherd boys. And he was also bewildered, how is this happening? Or how is this seeming change happening? And there he speaks a very, very amazing shloka. He says, Kim etad adbhutam eva vasudeva khilatmani vrajasya satmanas tokeshwa apurvam prema vardate. He says that what is this wonderful phenomena that is happening? What is this phenomena? What is this mystery that is happening? How is this happening? That how all these inhabitants of Vraja that are there, all the Vrajavasis that are there, including me, their affection to all these boys and calves is increasing like never before. Earlier all of them were centered, or all of them were attached to Krishna. And now they were getting attracted to all these personalities. And in all this pastime we see that even Balram, who is just an expansion of the Supreme Lord, even he was bewildered by all these pastimes. So this we see the uncommon pastimes of the Krishna, uncommon pastimes of the Supreme Lord, that how even great personalities, even Balram was bewildered to some extent. And there Prabhupada writes a very nice purport. He speaks that these uncommon events were taking place because of the influence of Yog Maya. From the very day on which Brahma stole the calves and boys, Yog Maya acted in such a way that residents of Vrindavan, including even Lord Brahma, could not understand how Yog Maya was working, and causing such uncommon things to happen. To some extent, later of course Balram understood what had happened, but to some extent or to some degree even he was bewildered by this wonderful event. So he was bewildered by all these events. But then of course he thought to himself that no one can actually bewilder me, the demigods cannot bewilder me, any ordinary person cannot bewilder me. And he understood that all this is the bewilderment, all this is but the creation of the Lord, or all this is the potency of the Lord, and that's why even I am getting bewildered. He understood later that how Krishna had only expanded into all the cowherd boys, all the calves over there, and that is the reason I was getting bewildered. So this is how we see the position of the Supreme Lord, that how he is the supreme controller, he is the cause of all causes, and there is no cause that he can get agitated by anything. Even the great demigods, even Balram himself got bewildered here, but then Supreme Lord cannot get bewildered in any circumstance. There is another very interesting pastime where Balram glorifies the position of Supreme Lord. And he speaks about that how great the Supreme Lord is. So this happens when the marriage of Samba was happening. So we know that Samba was the son of Krishna and his mother was Jambavati. So he went and he kidnapped Lakshmana. Now this Lakshmana is not Ram's brother, this is daughter of Duryodhan. So he kidnapped this Lakshmana and he kidnapped and he wanted to marry her. And that time the Kauravas, they became very, very angry. The Kauravas became very, very angry. They plotted against Samba, and all of them, it's described, Karna, Shalva, Duryodhan, all of them went together. And there was a very great struggle that happened. They fought, Samba was alone, they all were together, and yet it was very, very difficult for them to capture Samba. But of course, there were so many people and they finally captured and put Samba in prison. And that time also Balram comes there. So initially the Yadavas were very, very angry when they heard that Kauravas had captured Samba, they have kept him in prison. They decided to wage a war against the Kauravas. But that time Balram, just to pacify the situation, he went as a mediator. He went as a mediator just to bring Samba back or just to pacify the situation. But that time it's described that Kauravas insulted them like anything, or all the Duryodhan and all the people who are there, they insulted Balram like anything. They insulted the entire Yadu dynasty like anything, and they insulted even Lord Krishna. And it said they made statements like that this is like a shoe trying to climb atop one's head. This is what they spoke about the Yadus. They said that these Yadus, they are now ordering us. Who are these people? They are no one and they are trying to order us. So that time after all this had happened, that time Balram speaks something very amazing. He speaks about what the position of Lord Krishna is and what these people are thinking. So he speaks, Yasyangri Pankaja Rajo Khila Lokapaler. He speaks that Lokapaler are all the different planetary systems that are there. Even the masters of these planetary systems that are there throughout the world, even they keep the dust of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord on their head. The same Supreme Lord who these people are blaspheming, they are criticizing, even the masters of the different planetary system, they keep the dust of their lotus feet on their head. And then he says, Mauli Uttamer Dhritam Upasita Tirtha Tirtham. That his dust or his lotus feet is so auspicious that even the holy places become sacred by the dust of his lotus feet. That Lord Krishna whose dust of lotus feet is so auspicious that even Brahma, Lord Shiva and I myself, Balram is saying that I myself, all the expansions of the Supreme Lord, we keep that dust of the lotus feet on our head. And then he says, what is the value of this throne to Lord Krishna? These people are speaking like that Yadus are occupying the throne and Lord Krishna is not fit to be on the throne, and so many things they spoke. And Balram here says that they don't even know what is the position of the Supreme Lord. And what is this throne, what is this insignificant throne in front of Lord Krishna, whose dust of lotus feet is put even by Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva on their head. And even I myself put dust of his lotus feet on my hand. And they are blaspheming or they are criticizing, pulling down the position of the Lord. So what we are trying to understand here is how great the position of the Lord is. And naturally the Supreme Lord from whom everything emanates and everyone else in this world is a servant, how can he get agitated in any circumstance? There is no question, and that's what the Prabhupada mentions in this verse also. Yet the Lord remains unagitated by the touch, for he is equipoised in all circumstances. So that is but obvious. Even though the Nagpatnis who were there, their worship was affected when the Lord's lotus feet touched their bodies, because they were agitated by that touch. But then the Lord, who is the cause of all causes, he was not at all agitated. And that's why this rhetoric question, very nice question that is asked is, therefore, who will not worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead? This Lord Shiva is saying in his prayers that who will not worship such a personality or such a great Dhira who is not at all agitated by any circumstance. Such a person who entire world or everyone is his servant or everyone is the expansion of the Supreme Lord. Who will not worship such a personality? So that's how we understand that anyone in this Lord can get agitated, but the Supreme Lord cannot. Because He is the creator of everyone, and whatever happens, He is never agitated in any circumstance. Now further, when it comes to in the purport, Prabhupada explains that anyone who remains unagitated, even in the presence of cause for agitation is called dhira or equipoised. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being always in a transcendental position, is never agitated by anything. And then he explains that therefore someone who wants to become dhira must take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, dhiras tatra na mohiti. A person who is equipoised in all circumstances is not bewildered. So here he is talking about, till now we discussed that how the Lord is not agitated in all circumstances. Lord is not affected in any circumstance. Now he describes about the pure devotees who are there, who had taken complete shelter of the Lord. Even they are unagitated in any circumstance, or they are also not affected. And that's why he says, someone who wants to become dhira, he must take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. A person who takes complete shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord, even such a person is unaffected in all circumstances. In Bhagavad Gita, very amazing shloka which describes this that speaks, Apurya manam achala pratishtam samudra apa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kama yam pravishanti sarve sa shantim apanoti na kama kame. So here the sages, they are compared to the ocean. The description of the comparison is given that just like many rivers that are flowing, many rivers, they flow and they merge into the ocean. But then we don't see the level of the ocean rising or the level of the ocean going down. It remains steady. Almost all the time it remains steady, it's unagitated. And same way a saintly person, a dhira, is in whom so many desires might be flowing in him. Or he might be getting many different kinds of desires. But still he remains unaffected by those desires, or still he is not agitated by those desires. That is the person who can actually attain peace. That is what this shloka talks about. That a sage who is unmoved despite all these desires, he is a sage who can be a dhira, or who can attain actual peace. So that is what a description that is given, that a person who is equipoised in all circumstances, he is never bewildered, or he is not affected. And here Prabhupada gives the example of Prahlad Maharaj. So he speaks, Prahlad Maharaj is a perfect example of a dhira. When the fierce form of Narsimhadev appeared in order to kill Hiranyakashipu, Prahlad was unagitated. So this we have discussed multiple times, how this pastime happened, how the fierce form of Narsimhadev came, and he was very angry. Even after killing Hiranyakashipu, the form was very angry, or the Lord was very angry. Lord was very angry. And that time all the demigods, they were also bewildered to some extent. They were not knowing how to pacify the Lord. But then Prahlad Maharaj was completely unagitated. He was not at all affected, and he goes towards the Lord and he pacifies the Lord. And that is what is mentioned, that a dhira is never bewildered in any circumstance. As the Bhagavad Gita also says, Yasmin stitona dukkhena guru napi vichalayat. Meaning even in the cause of disturbance, even when there is a big problems come in the life of these great devotees, they are still never bewildered. And many examples we can see the example of Prahlad Maharaj himself. Even before the appearance of Narsimhadev, when Hiranyakashipu was torturing him in different ways. But he was not at all affected, he was not at all bewildered. We know the pastime when Hiranyakashipu had told Kayadu to feed him poison. Told Kayadu to mix some poison in the drink and feed it to Prahlad Maharaj. And Prahlad Maharaj could understand that there might be poison in this drink. But still he decided, all right, let me take it, or let me do whatever Krishna wants, and ultimately that will happen. So he was not at all agitated in anything. Whatever happened, he just thought that if Krishna wants to protect me, no one can affect me, or no one can kill me. And whatever it was, he was not at all disturbed in any circumstance. He was not at all affected in any circumstance. Even when Hiranyakashipu tried to kill him in so many ways. And Prabhupada gives many examples for this dhira. Prabhupada often quotes the example of Jesus Christ also. That when he was also being crucified, when he was being put on the cross, even though every cause was there for him to be agitated, every cause was there for him to be affected, but still he was asking the God to beg forgiveness for those people who were actually crucifying him. He was speaking that forgive them because they do not know what they are doing. So this is how we see that these people who take complete shelter of the Lord, or who are completely who has completely surrendered to the Lord, they are not at all agitated in any kind of circumstances. And many such great devotees, many such pastimes we have heard that how these devotees, they are not at all agitated. We know the pastime of Lord Shiva also, who is called as a Dhira, who is never affected in any circumstance. So one of the pastimes, we know the pastime of Mohini Murti. When he desired that he wanted to see that form of the Lord, and when he inquired for the Lord that he wanted to see that form, and Lord appeared in that incarnation. So seemingly it's described that he was bewildered for some time, or he was also agitated for some time. But after that entire pastime when he came back to his senses, that time it's described that he was not at all ashamed at whatever happened. Rather, Lord Shiva is very, very proud. And why he was proud? Because he can understand that only one personality can bewilder me. Or I was bewildered by the potency of the Supreme Lord. And he was proud that how great my Supreme Lord, that he can bewilder anyone, including myself. So that is the thing, that no one, even the devotees who have taken complete shelter of the Lord, they are completely sure that nothing can bewilder them. They are not affected by anything in any circumstance. Only, of course, in some exceptional cases, when the Lord desires to bewilder them, they get bewildered. But otherwise, they are not at all affected in any circumstance. And we know about, now tomorrow is the disappearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So now we know how he was also a very, very great Dhira, or a person who was never agitated in any circumstance. So many pastimes are there, so many things that happened in his life, but he was also not at all bewildered, not at all affected. Many, many things are there. So one of the things we know about how he was called as the Lion Guru. How he used to vehemently speak against all the deviant philosophies which were prevalent at that time. He spoke against all the upper sampradayas which were there. And one of the things he did, he spoke vehemently against the caste Goswamis who were there. The Goswamis who were in the caste, who were hardly following any rules and regulations, and they used to think themselves that they are the ones who are eligible to worship the deities. No one else is eligible. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he spoke strongly against them. He preached the same philosophy Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached, that anyone and everyone who knows the science of Krishna, he can become a guru. There is no restriction of caste. So we know he had to face so many vehement protests, so many things, these brahmanas, just to hamper his process or just to hamper his preaching. And one of the pastimes which Prabhupada himself tells about, of which our dear Srila Prabhupada, he relates this pastime, which Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur told to him personally. That how once these caste Goswamis, they had bribed the policemen. And in those times they had given, it seems, 25,000 to the policemen. That you keep quiet and we will do what is needful, or we will kill this person. Now, of course, the police officer described, he accepted the bribe, but then he went to this person, then he went to the saint, or then he went to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he told him that of course we accept bribes, we do all these things, but we won't dare to do it for a saint, for a saintly person like you. And he came and he warned him beforehand. And all this agitation, all this was just because of his vehement preaching against all these caste Goswamis. But still, after hearing all that, still after knowing all that, he was not at all affected, or he didn't care about it. He didn't stop his preaching. He was completely unagitated by all that, and he continued his vehement preaching against these people. That is how we can realize that how great he was, or how he was a complete Dhira, not at all affected in any circumstances. And Prabhupada spoke many things in glorification of his spiritual master, or Srila Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada spoke many things in glorification of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He spoke that how many things happened in his life, many people tried to obstruct his preaching of the devotional message, but still he was unaffected. And it's described that he was so great, he was so scholarly that he could speak with any kind of person. Not just devotees or not just spiritualists, he could speak with any personality and could convince him of devotional service. And that's why even the big scholars who were there at that time, they used to be afraid of approaching Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They used to be afraid of even approaching the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he knew that how great he was, or how great a scholar he was. And that's why he used to call, or Prabhupada used to call him a living encyclopedia. That he knew everything, he could speak on any subject and he never compromised. And that's why all these so-called avatars who were there, so-called yogis who were there, they became enemy of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. All those so-called false spiritualists who were there, They were the enemies of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur because he was vehemently preaching about the absolute truth, or he was preaching about the actual philosophy was there, the philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism was there. But still, even after so much opposition, he was not at all affected, or he continued remaining a dhira, or unagitated in all circumstances. And Prabhupada even mentioned, because of his preaching, sometimes his god brothers, or sometimes his own disciples, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's own disciples were sometimes bewildered. Even they said that this is a chopping technique, or sometimes this might not work, might be unsuccessful. But still Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur continued, and Prabhupada says that those who spoke like that, later they went out of the mission, or they were not able to continue for a long time. But then he was a great Paramahansa. One of the other pastimes we see, or another great pastimes that happened in the life of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So after the death of Gaur, or after the disappearance of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, it's described when he disappeared from this world. So many so-called Babajis who were there, many so-called people who were there, the so-called spiritualists who were there, they all approached that body, or they all claimed their proprietorship over the body. That we want to take this body, or we want to take this body to our hermitages, and we'll build a samadhi for him. Not because they had some affection for God Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, or they had some caring for him, but because they knew that he was a very, very great saintly person, he was a very, very famous personality, and many people would come to his samadhi, many people would donate money towards his samadhi. And that's why they were all claiming right over his body. And it's described situation was so tough that police had come to that location, and they knew that some violence will happen there. They will start fighting amongst each other now for the possession of this body. And there it's described, amidst all that circumstance, amidst all that agitating circumstances, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also came there. Alone he came there. And then he said that I have claim over this body. Very, very confidently, very vehemently, even among such opposition, he claimed that I have the claim, or I have the right over this body. And all of them were very, very angry. Already they were fighting amongst each other. Now one more person has come. So now they were even more angry. And they said, who is this person? He's a brahmachari. He's not even a sannyasi. He's not even a Babaji like us. And how can he claim over this body? And there, as we know, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, famous for his preaching, he was the lion guru. There he said in front of everyone, or he vehemently spoke in front of everyone, that all of you who claim to be Babajis, who claim to be saintly persons, if any one of you within the last 1 year, he had no illicit connection with a woman, then he could come and take claim of this body, or take this body. And then he said, okay, no problem. No one came forward, it seems. And then he said, okay, 1 month. Then he said 7 days, anyone for the last 7 days who did not have any illicit connection, they could also come forward and claim this body. And described, no one came forward. The police who was present, they said, okay, we'll do the investigation, we'll find out who had connection or not. And here Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, no investigation is needed. Let them first, their word is enough. Let them come forward and say that they have done this. And everyone was fearful of him. No one came forward to speak anything. And everyone turned their backs and they left that place. So this is how we see how he was a great dhira, how he was unagitated in all the circumstances. And later some of the people who were there, they were saying like that Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj, they had told that he has told all of us before his death that after my death, my body should be dragged in the streets of Navdeep. Or they should tie the body with chains, and they should drag him through the streets of Navdeep. And when this was told to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was very, very furious. He said that his body is fit to be touched by the hands of the Supreme Lord. That is his humility that he was saying like that. You cannot literally drag his body like that. And he gave the example, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when Haridas Thakur left his body, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally placed his body in his hand and he danced with his body. That is the caliber of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. How can you even think of dragging his body like that? So that is what we see the great position of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, how he always preached the absolute truth, vehemently preached his philosophy, and how he opposed all these deviant philosophies over there. And in all the circumstances and all the different things, he was unagitated or unaffected by anything. Because he knew the Lord is there and Lord will protect him in all the circumstances. Lord will take care, Lord will do the needful. And that's why he continued everything and he was not at all affected in all the circumstances. And that is what is mentioned, that Dhira is one who has taken complete shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Because these people, they had taken complete shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. They were not at all affected. First of all, we discussed about the Supreme Lord, that how he is not at all affected in any circumstances. He is unagitated in all the circumstances. And those people who find faults in the Lord, it's not that there are some faults in the Lord. They are the ones who are envious of the position of the Lord. And that is the reason they find faults in the Supreme Lord. And then we discussed that how the Lord is not agitated, and even those people who have taken complete shelter of him, even they are not agitated in any circumstance. And when we speak about great devotees, when we speak about all these personalities, another great personality is our founder Acharya, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, who we also see throughout his life, even in so many struggles, so many tough circumstances, was not at all agitated in any circumstance. Or he was also a Dhira because he had taken complete shelter of the Supreme Lord. How he says in that famous poem, Markine Bhagavad Dharma, that nachao, nachao, that make me dance as you want me to dance, because I am a completely surrendered soul unto you. And that is why even he was a Dhira, or he was not at all affected in all circumstances. And one more thing we can see for ourselves, the more when difficult situations come in our life, the more when tough situations come in our life, and the more we are getting agitated because of it, so we can understand the less we are dependent on the Lord, less we are dependent on our own skills, less we are dependent on ourselves, and then the less is our dependence on the Lord. Because the more our dependence on the Lord increases, more we surrender to the Supreme Lord, the less we will be agitated in all these circumstances, just like these great personalities. But in our current situation, we get agitated at any small thing, anything that happens in our life. That is because our dependence on the Lord is very, very less. And that is why, as it's mentioned here, we have to strive for taking shelter or depending on the Lord more and more. Only when we are able to do that, only when we are able to take shelter of the Lord, then we can also come to the position of being a Dhira. Then we can be unagitated in all the circumstances, just like all these great devotees we discussed. Otherwise, the less we are dependent, the more we are dependent on our own efforts or our own skills, the more in tough times we will become agitated or will be shaken to the core. So this is what we see. And finally, Prabhupada writes in the purport that others, including even Lord Brahma, were frightened by the features of the Lord. But basically, anyone gets bewildered by the features of the Lord or by the different potencies of the Lord, except those who have taken complete shelter of the Lord. So with this, I would like to pause here. Any questions or comments we can take?
Even Balram also got bewildered with Krishna's pastime with that Brahma. But Prabhupada mentioned like many places, like Balram is like same as Krishna, only just difference of color. So how we can understand, like not only in Brahma episode, in many other episodes also, Balramji was not getting like what is Krishna's name. So how we can understand these two things?
So Balram, your question was Balram is same as Krishna. Means what was your question?
Like Prabhupada said that Krishna and Balram, they are like same. That Krishna is black Balram and Balram is white Krishna. They are same. And in this case, like here in the past times, Balram was not able to like figure out what is going on.
So that is generic, like we talk about all the Vishnu Tattvas that are there. So Vishnu Tattvas, we say they are all expansions. Sometimes he says there is no difference. Prabhupada also says Vishnu and Krishna are same. So he speaks like that, but ultimately we understand they are all expansions of the Supreme Lord. And similarly, even Balram, to many extent, he is the first expansion of the Supreme Lord, and he also has the same potency as the Supreme Lord. But still there is a difference. But there Balram, one thing was there, he cannot get agitated or affected by any other thing. He himself, when he was bewildered in that pastime, he could understand this is not some Rakshasi Maya, this is not some Maya of any individual personality, because I cannot be affected by anything else except the potency of the Supreme Lord, or except the potency of my master, that is Supreme Lord Krishna. And that's why Prabhupada often uses that term that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and Balram is the Servitor Supreme Personality, he is the Servant Supreme Personality of Godhead, like that. So of course he is also supreme, he also has the same potency, but still the position is of that of a servant.
So when Prabhupada is telling that there is no difference, so Prabhupada means that there is no difference of tattva.
There is no difference of tattva, he is the same expansion, like that. There is difference also. that is definitely there. Ellen, Prabhuji?
Time can take reflections. That's going to be very nice. That was very nice. Nice knowing Era and various other topics that you mentioned. One point which I would like to highlight from the class is more we are agitated means less we are dependent on the Lord. This is a very important point. So if we call ourselves a surrendered souls, it means there shouldn't be any agitation in any critical situation. And also those who are completely surrendered onto the Lord, they are never affected by any situation. So this is another similar point to contemplate on. So if we are affectionate towards someone, then naturally whatever they do, it feels very nice. That's how in Krishna Leela or in Prabhupada Leela or Gaur Leela or in the Leela that is happening around. So naturally, we feel very mesmerized when we see any activity. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for nice class. So you explain that how when envious persons they read about the descriptions of the Lord, they take out their own meaning only. So nice descriptions are given, but they think, oh, Lord is just like us. He is also an intoxicant like us with red eyes. So this is because of their lying enviousness within them. But when we have love and affection towards a person, then the same activities of that person will find very, very nice, very, very attractive. You gave example of Prabhupada, that Prabhupada, just by the way he used to drink his water, his disciples would be attracted by that. But his own god brothers, they could not appreciate that what amazing work they did. Yeah, Prabhupada did. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for this wonderful class. You mentioned one more point that people who are not have affection towards anyone, so which means they have enviousness toward them and they find faults in them, and it shows if they are envious to the devotee of the Lord, means they are envious to the Lord also, and because of enviousness they are fearful. Like you gave example of Kamsa, and also the kitten and cat and mouse. So the kitten, she knows like she will not a cat will not bite me, even though she is in the mouth of the cat, but the mouse is always fearful. So that shows like if one take the shelter, like we can be fearful by that. And Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, thanks for the class. This point is very nice. Envious on others always makes us to find the faults. So whatever they even do the good, also it shows us a fault, something like that. So and also if we have love affection, naturally like we will whatever they will do, we will feel as that is a good. So that is very nice point. And depending on Lord, by taking complete shelter, we will become Dera. So we will be like unagitated. That point is very nice.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, the point you told that if we are affectionate to someone, then whatever activities he does, we will love it. So that point I liked very much. And if we are envious, then it's opposite to that. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for nice class. You told that people who are envy of the Lord, they are always fearful in their life, and the person who are occupied in all situations, they never get agitated. And the more we are dependent on the Lord, so we will be less agitated.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you very much for such a wonderful class. Yeah, this point is very nice. Whenever there is enviousness, so there is automatically fear that comes up. And the conclusion of the whole class is that the more one depends on the Lord, the less he is agitated. So it's very, very important to contemplate and see in my life how much I am agitated. That shows how much I am dependent on the Lord. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the very nice class. So the point which I liked was like how Balram was glorifying the Lord, like Duryodhana and Kauravas, they didn't understand the glory of the Lord. They were envious of the Lord, so they were blaspheming the Lord. But Balram was saying that like how great the Lord is. Even the Lokapalas and Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and even Balram himself keeps the lotus feet of the Lord on his head. Like he keeps the dust of the lotus feet of this on his head, and wherever the Lord's lotus feet touches, even the holy places becomes more purified and more sacred. So how great the Lord is, very nice. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you so much for your class. You mentioned Prabhu one shloka from Bhagavad Gita, Apurnamanam Achalam Pratishtam, and you were describing about the quality of dhira. So that point I liked very much. And whenever Prabhu I see the ocean, whenever we go to Jagannath Puri or somewhere, so I immediately remember this shloka that it is describing if someone wants to become peaceful or happy, they have to tolerate the or means continuously the desires, whatever desires are coming, we should tolerate, because sage means not like the desires will not come, but the sage means that who can tolerate it. And then it's not like that sage, if someone becomes sages, then the unwanted desires will not come. So the thing that he will tolerate those desires, and the normal person, the desires will come and he will be will go, he will try to fulfill those desires. Hare Krishna.